Good day everyone. Today I'll be presenting to you what communicative language teaching is. So I'll be presenting to you the historical background of communicative language teaching, its versions, the communicative language teaching approach, and the pedagogical implications. So there are two interacting sources of influence that shape the field of language teaching. So first is one comes from outside the profession and reflects the changing status of English in the world. And the second source of change is internally initiated. That is, it reflects the language teaching profession gradually evolving a changed understanding of its own essential knowledge base and associated instructional practices. Now let us start with what reflects the changing status of English in the world. So first is we have essential features of contemporary societies are an English proficient workforce. So this emphasizes how English can play in larger plans for economic progress. And another reason is the increasing demand worldwide for language programs that deliver the foreign language skills and competencies needed by today's global citizens, and a demand from government for more effective approaches to the preparation of language teachers. So there is a need to articulate and develop alternative methods of language teaching was considered a high priority considering the changing educational realities in Europe. And with this worldwide demand for English also came a demand for quality language teaching. And also, there has often been a perception that language teaching policies and practices are not providing an adequate response to the problem. So, the increasing interdependence of European countries required a working knowledge of the major languages in the continent. Thus, the effort to look for and develop alternative ways of teaching languages was in the list of top priorities. Now, let's proceed to what reflects the language teaching profession gradually evolving a change understanding. So here, the language teaching profession undergoes periodic waves of renewal and paradigm shifts as it continually reinvents itself through the impact of new ideas, new educational philosophies, advances in technology, and new research paradigms. Likewise, the British applied linguists saw the need to focus more on the communicative proficiency rather than structures. So CLT, or communicative language teaching, was the result of a questioning of assumptions and practices associated with situational language teaching. So we all know that situational language teaching aimed to teach basic grammar within meaningful situations. So speech, structures, and a focus on a set of basic vocabulary items are seen as the basics of language teaching. However, it was seen that this method did not allow for creativity of interactions. So there is a need to study the language itself. Next is we have a response to the sorts of criticisms the prominent American linguist Noam Chomsky had leveled at structural linguistic theory. So CLT was partly a response to Chomsky's demonstration that current structures of language could not account for the uniqueness and creativity of uttered sentences. And also, British applied linguists saw the need to focus in language teaching on communicative proficiency rather than on mere mastery of structures. So, communicative proficiency is defined as fluent mastery of the foreign language in different contexts. Now, let's proceed to the versions of communicative language teaching. So after considering the needs of European language learners, the British linguist Day A. Wilkins, 1972, proposed a functional or communicative definition of language based on which a syllabus can be developed. So he analyzed the communicative meanings that a learner needs to express and understand. Thus, instead of the traditional system of teaching grammar, he focused on the meaning. So there are two types of meaning. So we have first the notional categories, which includes concepts such as time, sequence, quantity, location, and frequency. And the second one is categories of communicative function, which includes requests, denials, offers, and complaints. So both American and British proponents typically describe CLT as an approach and not a method that aim to first make communicative competence the goal of language teaching, and second is develop procedures for the teaching of the four language skills that acknowledge the interdependence of language communication. So advocates of some forms of task-based language teaching see it as an extension and fine-tuning of the principles of CLT. So this builds teaching and learning around real-life tasks from which the aspects of communicative language use and grammar can emerge. So this anti-structural view can be held to represent the language learning version of a more general learning perspective, which is learning by doing or the experience approach. Another frequently cited dimension of CLT is its learner-centered and experience-based view of second language teaching. Also has antecedents outside the language teaching tradition per se. So, meaning the class activities are focused on and driven by the students, not by the teacher. So, individual learners are seen by having these unique interests, styles, and needs and goals, which should be reflected in the activities or in the learning materials that are introduced to them. Common to all versions of CLT is a theory of language teaching that starts from a communicative model of language use. So it is focused on achieving a communicative purpose. Now let's proceed to communicative language teaching approaches, and let us start with the theory of language. So the communicative approach in language teaching starts from a functional theory of language, one that focuses on language as a means of communication. The goal of language teaching is to develop what Himes referred to as communicative competence. So the functional approach looks at how language enables us to do things, to share information, to inquire, to express attitudes, to entertain, to get our needs met, to construct ideas, and even to make sense of the world. So Himes defined communicative competence not only as an inherent grammatical competence, but also the ability to use grammatical competence in a variety of communicative situations, thus bringing the social linguistic perspective into Chomsky's linguistic view of competence. Another linguistic theory of communication favored in CLT is Halliday's functional account of language use. So there are 7 basic functions that language performs for children learning their first language. So first is we have the instrumental function. So it is using language to get things done. And second is the regulatory function. So it is using language to control the behavior of others. Third is we have the interactional function, or using language to create an interaction with others. Fourth is we have the personal function, or using language to express personal feelings and meanings. Fifth is the heuristic function, or using language to learn and to discover things. Sixth is the imaginative functions, or using language to create a world of the imagination. And the seventh is the representational function, or using language to communicate information. So Cannell and Swain 1980 identified 4 dimensions of communicative competence. So first is we have grammatical competence. So this refers to what Chomsky calls linguistic competence and what Himes intends by what is formally possible. So it is the domain of grammatical and lexical capacity. So when we say social linguistic competence, this refers to the understanding of the social context in which communication takes place, including role relationships, the shared information of the participants, and the communicative purpose for their interaction. Then third is we have discourse competence. So these refer to the interpretation of individual message elements in terms of their interconnectedness and of how meaning is represented in relationship to the entire discourse or text. Then last one, we have strategic competence. This refers to the coping strategies that communicators employ to initiate, terminate, maintain, repair, and redirect communication. Now let's have the objectives. So objectives in CLT courses and materials may relate either to the very general language learning goals or to those linked to learners with very specific needs. In the case of the former, the very general language learning goals, objectives will reflect the type of syllabus framework used, such as whether the course is organized around a topic-based, function-based, or skill-based syllabus. And for the very specific needs, so in the case of courses developed for learners with more specific needs, objectives will be specific to the context of teaching and learning. Now, what are the types of learning and teaching activities in CLT? So, activities must reflect the following principles. First, make real communication the focus of language learning. Second, provide opportunities for learners to experiment and try out what they know. Also, be tolerant of learners' errors as they indicate that the learner is building up his or her communicative competence. Next, provide opportunities for learners to develop both accuracy and fluency. And also, link the different skills such as speaking, reading, and listening together, since they usually occur together in the real world. And lastly, let students induce or discover grammar rules. In CLT, instead of predominance of teacher-fronted teaching, teachers are encouraged to make use of small group work. So pair and group activities gave learners greater opportunities to use the language and to develop fluency. So there are some activities in CLT. So first is we have jigsaw activities where the class is divided into groups and each group has part of the information needed to complete an activity. And the class must fit the pieces together to complete the whole. Then the next one is task completion activities. So here, there are puzzles, games, map reading, and other kinds of classroom tasks in which the focus is in using one's language resources to complete tasks. Then we also have information gathering activities like student-conducted surveys, interviews, and searches in which students are required to use their linguistic resources to collect information. We also have opinion sharing activities like students compare values, opinions, beliefs such as ranking tasks in which students list 6 qualities in order of importance when choosing a date or spouse. Then we also have information transfer activities or taking information that is presented in one form and representing it in a different form. We also have reasoning gap activities or deriving some new information from given information through the process of inference, practical reasoning. Example, working out a teacher's timetable on the basis of given class timetables. And lastly, we have role plays, wherein students are assigned roles and improvise a scene or exchange based on given information or clues. Now let's have the different roles in CLT. So let's start with the roles of the learner. So the role of learner is the negotiator between the self, the learning process, and the object of learning. For the teacher has 2 main roles. The first one is to facilitate the communication process between all participants in the classroom and between these participants and the various activities and texts. And the second role is to act as an independent participant within the learning teaching group. And the latter role is closely related to the objectives of the first role that arises from it. Now, we have also the role of instructional materials. So, let us have first the text-based materials. So these are the numerous textbooks that are designed to direct and support communicative language teaching. And for the task-based materials, these refer to the variety of games, role plays, simulations, and task-based communication activities that have been prepared to support CLT classes. And also we have realia-based materials. So these might include language-based realia such as signs, magazines, advertisements, and newspapers, or graphic and visual sources. And lastly, we have technology-supported materials. So these provides opportunities for accessing authentic language input, like combining text, images, audio, and video. To sum up, communicative language teaching is best considered an approach rather than a method. It refers to a diverse set of principles that reflect a communicative view of language and language learning, and that can be used to support a wide variety of classroom procedures. Thank you for watching.